There is a chilling detail buried deep within the Associated Press investigation published Wednesday morning, a detail that renders the official Pentagon narrative not just insufficient but hauntingly detached from reality. For every American senator who walked out of classified briefings calling the answers inadequate, and for every military family watching the casualty count rise with bated breath, this detail is the smoking gun. It is the bridge between the sterile language of force protection and the charred remains of 6 American lives. The truth is this: the 6 service members who perished at Port Shuaiba, Kuwait, were not sheltered within the reinforced concrete heart of a hardened military installation. They were not behind the multi-layered, impenetrable air defense umbrella of Camp Arifjan, the primary U.S. Army base in the region. Instead, they were stationed inside a triple-wide trailer, a converted office space that was essentially a glorified shipping container. While the Pentagon publicly touted the facility as fortified, the reality on the ground was a masterclass in lethal improvisation. The fortifications cited by officials consisted of 6 to 12-foot-high T-walls, concrete barriers designed to mitigate blast overpressure from ground-level explosions such as car bombs or mortar fragments. However, these walls offered zero overhead protection. In the era of modern drone warfare, where a one-way suicide UAV arrives from a high-angle trajectory, these T-walls were as effective as a picket fence against a thunderstorm. The drone didn't need to punch through the concrete. It simply dropped from the sky and detonated directly on the thin roof of the container. The irony of their location is perhaps the most bitter pill to swallow. According to Joey Amore, the husband of Sergeant First Class Nicole Moore, his wife had been moved off the main base just 1 week before the Iranian strike. The military's logic was dispersal. Command assessed that Camp Arifjan was too large and obvious a target. They believed that by breaking soldiers into smaller, separated groups and moving them to off-base locations like a civilian port surrounded by oil storage tanks, refineries, and a power plant, they would be safer. They chose to trade the heavy air defenses of a Patriot-covered base for the perceived anonymity of a shipping container 10 miles away. It was a fatal miscalculation. The Iranian drone found the container anyway. Despite the Pentagon's claim of having the most extensive air defense umbrella in the world, the system failed at its most basic task detection. Sources indicate that the warning sirens, the counter-battery systems designed to give soldiers those precious few seconds to dive for cover, remained silent. The drone was already inside the perimeter, already over the target, before the system registered its presence. For Nicole Moore and her 5 colleagues, there was no warning, no indication of an incoming weapon, and no time to shelter. There was only the moment of impact, followed by a fire so intense that it made the recovery of bodies nearly impossible in the immediate aftermath. Nicole Moore was 39 years old, a mother and a logistics expert from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. She wasn't a frontline infantryman charging a trench. She was a supply specialist working in a tactical operations center. Her death and the deaths of those beside her has transformed the political landscape in Washington. It has stripped away the veneer of early operational success and replaced it with a singular, undeniable question that cuts through every press conference. If the most sophisticated military on earth cannot protect 6 soldiers in a port facility 10 miles from their main base, what can it actually protect? The Shuaiba strike has exposed the Shuaiba illusion, the dangerous belief that dispersal equals safety and that T-walls equal fortification. As the fire at the port was finally extinguished, a new fire began to burn in the halls of Congress, fueled by the realization that these 6 Americans were sent to live in a tinderbox waiting for a squirter that the world's most expensive defense system never saw coming. The technical failure at Port Shuaiba was not merely a lapse in local security, it was a devastating validation of a calculated military philosophy that Washington is only now beginning to voice. During a tense press conference at the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth attempted to contextualize the tragedy with a single jarring word that has since ignited a firestorm of controversy: squirter. In the sterilized lexicon of the American military, a squirter is a projectile, be it a drone, a missile, or a mortar that slips through a defensive gap. It is the one that gets away. Hegseth's official characterization was as clinical as it was chilling. You have air defenses and a lot's coming in, and you hit most of it. Every once in a while, you might have one. A squirter that makes its way through. For the families of the fallen, the term felt like a callous dismissal of their loved ones' lives. For military analysts, however, it was an admission of a systemic vulnerability that no amount of high-tech umbrellas can fully patch. The Squirter Doctrine is built on a foundation of mathematical saturation, not technological superiority. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has long understood that it does not need to build a better missile than the American Patriot or a more sophisticated radar than the THAAD system. It simply needs to launch more threats than the American systems have the capacity to process simultaneously. This is the calculus of attrition. Iran's strategy is to flood the sky with a heterogeneous mix of hardware, Shahed, 136 suicide drones, subsonic cruise missiles, and ballistic projectiles arriving from multiple vectors at the exact same moment. Each of these requires a high-cost interceptor to neutralize. The math of saturation means that at a sufficient volume, squirters are no longer accidents or anomalies. They are the guaranteed outputs of a system's capacity limit. Take, for example, the recent data from the United Arab Emirates cited in the source documents. During a massive Iranian salvo, the UAE successfully intercepted 645 drones, a staggering feat of engineering. Yet 44 drones got through. Those 44 squirters hit targets within UAE territory, proving that even a 93% success rate is a strategic failure when the remaining 7% find high-value targets like shipping containers or oil refineries. When you are defending against hundreds of simultaneous threats, hitting most of it isn't a victory. It's a delay of the inevitable. This doctrine exploits the economic asymmetry of modern warfare. An Iranian Shahed drone costs approximately $20,000 to produce. An American interceptor missile can cost anywhere from $2 million to $4 million. By forcing the United States to fire millions of dollars into the sky to kill a lawnmower with wings, Iran is not just aiming for soldiers, they are aiming for the depletion of the U.S. Treasury and its interceptor stockpiles. Secretary Hegseth's Squirter was not a sophisticated hypersonic missile or a Mach 14 maneuvering warhead that outran American technology. It was likely a slow-moving, relatively simple drone that simply arrived at the moment the defensive eyes were looking elsewhere, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the incoming swarm. The tragedy at Port Shuaiba has made one thing undeniable. The most extensive air defense umbrella in the world has a saturation point. Iran has found it. They don't need to defeat American technology. They just need to outmath it. By launching enough simultaneous threats to ensure a squirter reaches a target on any given salvo, Iran has transformed the tactical reality of the Middle East. They have proven that in the age of drone swarms, the defender has to be right 100% of the time, but the attacker only has to be lucky once. The 6 dead soldiers in Kuwait are the human cost of this mathematical certainty. They weren't killed by a gap that was unavoidable. They were killed because the volume of incoming threats exceeded the system's capacity to engage every one of them. As Washington grapples with this reality, the Squirter Doctrine stands as a grim reminder that in modern conflict, quantity often has a quality all its own. For over 3 decades, Kuwait has served as the quiet, reliable anchor of the American security architecture in the Persian Gulf. Since the liberation of the country from Saddam Hussein's forces in 1991, it has hosted one of the largest concentrations of U.S. military forces in the Middle East, functioning as the primary logistical heartbeat for operations across the region. However, the strike at Port Shuaiba has shattered that long-standing stability, marking the most significant military escalation on Kuwaiti soil since the 1990 Iraqi invasion. This is no longer a support theater. Kuwait has been forcibly dragged onto the front lines of a direct confrontation between Washington and Tehran. The catalyst for this transformation is a bitter irony of geography and alliance. Iran's current campaign is not a random outburst of aggression. It is a calculated retaliation for an American operation that utilized Kuwaiti-hosted bases to facilitate the strike that killed Iran's supreme leader. By using Kuwaiti soil as a launchpad for such a high-stakes mission, the U.S. inadvertently turned its most stable partner into a primary target. The IRGC has made it clear, if a base is used to strike Iran, that base and the country hosting it is a legitimate combat zone. The intensity of this escalation was most tragically illustrated not by an Iranian hit, but by a catastrophic breakdown in coalition coordination. Amidst the chaos of the massive drone and missile salvo that preceded the Port Shuaiba strike, the fog of war claimed a devastating toll. In the frantic effort to defend their airspace, Kuwaiti air defenses accidentally shot down 3 American F-15E Strike Eagles. The friendly fire incident confirmed by both the U.S. and the Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense highlights a terrifying reality. The sheer volume of Iran's saturation strategy discussed in Section 2 creates a cognitive and technical overload that breaks down even the most sophisticated command and control systems. When hundreds of slow-moving drones, fast-moving missiles, and friendly interceptors occupy the same radar picture, the distinction between friend and foe becomes a lethal coin flip. The F-15E, a dual-role fighter designed for deep strike missions, was never supposed to be a casualty of its own host nation's panic. This incident has sent shockwaves through the 3-5-year-old security foundation that Kuwait built with America. For the first time since the Gulf War, Kuwaiti citizens are experiencing the tremors of a conflict they did not start but are uniquely positioned to suffer from. The Ali al-Salem Air Base, another major hub hosting U.S. troops, also came under direct fire, signaling that the IRGC is systematically probing every node of the American presence in the small Gulf state. The powder keg is not just about the incoming missiles. It is about the geopolitical fragility of the region. Kuwait's security has always depended on the assumption that American protection was absolute. But when American jets are falling from the sky due to friendly fire and American soldiers are dying in shipping containers at civilian ports, that assumption evaporates. The escalation is forcing a painful re-evaluation in Kuwait City. Is the 3-5-year partnership with the United States still a shield, or has it become a lightning rod for Iranian wrath? As the smoke rises from the refineries and ports, the historical echoes of 1990 are unavoidable. Yet, unlike the Iraqi invasion, which had a clear front line and a conventional army to repel, this new threat is decentralized, technological, and relentless. Kuwait is no longer the rear area, it is the center of the storm. While the tragedy at Port Shuaiba dominated the headlines, a more geographically significant and strategically profound development was unfolding hundreds of kilometers away. The conflict has officially spilled out of the narrow confines of the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, reaching deep into the Indian Ocean. This expansion represents a masterclass in what military theorists call systems thinking, a shift from opportunistic targeting to the systematic dismantling of the logistical infrastructure that allows a superpower to project its will across the globe. The target was an American destroyer, specifically a vessel serving as a critical refueling platform located in the open waters of the Indian Ocean. According to source documents, Iran utilized its most advanced long-range assets, the Qadr 380 and the Abu Mahdi Clay anti-ship missiles. These are not short-range coastal defenses. They are weapons with ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers, capable of being launched from deep within Iranian territory or from mobile naval vessels. By striking a target in the Indian Ocean, Iran has sent a clear message: there is no blue water sanctuary left for the U.S. Navy. However, the genius of the strike lay not in where it happened, but in what was hit. Iran did not target a carrier strike group or a swarm of F-35 jets. They targeted the fuel supply chain. In modern aerial warfare, the legs of a fighter jet are its greatest limitation. An Israeli F-35 or an American F-22 has a finite internal fuel capacity. To conduct a mission from Israel to Tehran and back, a two-way mission, these aircraft are entirely dependent on mid-air refueling or nearby tanker-type vessels to extend their operational reach. By targeting the refueling platform, the IRGC executed a move of pure logistical asymmetry. Strike the jet and you remove one pilot and one airframe. Strike the tanker and you effectively ground an entire squadron. Without the logistical connective tissue provided by these refueling platforms, the one-way mission into Iranian airspace becomes a suicide mission, or simply impossible. The F-35's stealth and speed become irrelevant if the aircraft cannot physically reach its target and return to base. This is the essence of systems thinking. Iran is not interested in winning a Top Gun-style dogfight. They are interested in the logistical infrastructure that makes the mission possible. They are targeting the fuel, the radars, the maintenance hubs, and the tankers. By degrading the refueling chain, Iran is forcing a contraction of the American and Israeli operational envelope. They are turning the vast distances of the Middle East, once a strategic advantage for U.S. air power, into a logistical nightmare. The Indian Ocean strike proves that Iran's targeting doctrine is far more sophisticated than Washington's squirter rhetoric suggests. It is a deliberate effort to sever the umbilical cords of the American military machine. If the U.S. Navy has to move its tankers further out to sea to avoid 20 kilometers range missiles, the fighters must spend more time and fuel just getting to the gas station, further reducing their time over the target. As the American public struggles to process why a destroyer was hit so far from the traditional combat zone, the reality is setting in at the Pentagon. The war is no longer about who has the best jets. It is about who can protect the gas. And in the Indian Ocean, Iran has proven that the most extensive air defense umbrella cannot cover the entire logistical tale of a global superpower. While the fires at Port Shuaiba were being extinguished with foam and grit, a different kind of conflagration was igniting in Washington, D.C. The political landscape, once dominated by the bravado of early operational success, has shifted violently toward a crisis of accountability. On March 2, 2026, President Trump officially submitted a War Powers Resolution notification to Congress regarding the February 28th strikes against Iran. This was not a mere formality. It was the pulling of a digital trigger that started a relentless 60-day countdown. Under the War Powers Act of 1973, a president who commits U.S. forces to hostilities must either receive a formal authorization for the use of military force AUMF from Congress or withdraw those forces within 60 days. The clock is now ticking toward May 1st. President Trump has publicly claimed the conflict will last only 4 to 5 weeks, but the strategic reality suggests otherwise. With Day 6 already witnessing the destruction of a THAAD battery and the deaths of 6 Americans, the tension between the White House's optimistic timeline and the legal deadline has reached a breaking point. The most devastating blow to the administration's war footing, however, did not come from a committee room, but from a single statistic buried in a CBS News casualty update. According to analysts, 85% of the American public does not accept this war. This is perhaps the most consequential statistic published since the first bombs fell. It represents a total collapse of the rally round the flag effect that usually accompanies the start of hostilities. The American public is not just skeptical, they are actively resistant. This public sentiment has emboldened a bipartisan wave of dissent. Republican senators who had spent the first 14 months of Trump's second term voting for every presidential priority are now publicly breaking ranks. They are questioning the adequacy of the war plan, the accuracy of the intelligence that led to the embassy strike, and the sheer negligence of force protection that left soldiers in shipping containers. Senator Chuck Schumer's characterization of the classified briefings as completely and totally insufficient has become a rare point of agreement across the aisle. The Democratic response, articulated with clinical precision by Senator Chris Coons, captures the essence of the congressional opposition. The American people were not consulted. The Congress was not consulted. Our allies in the region were not consulted. This is not a plan. This is improvisation at the cost of American lives and regional stability. The death of Sergeant First Class Nicole Moore has personalized this political fight. She is no longer just a statistic. She is a 9-year-old mother from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, whose face is now the symbol of improvisation. The political narrative has shifted from abstract, defensive umbrellas to the specific image of a charred shipping container at a civilian port. This is the 6-0 day clock reality, an administration fighting a war on two fronts, one against a decentralized Iranian military executing a ghost campaign, and another against a Congress and a public that feel blindsided. As the clock ticks toward May 1st, the White House finds itself in a corner. To stay in the fight, they need an AUMF that 85% of the country opposes. To withdraw is to admit a catastrophic strategic failure. Every day that passes without a clear victory only deepens the depletion point of political capital, leaving the administration with fewer allies and even fewer options. As the conflict grinds into its second week, a chilling realization is setting in at the Pentagon and on Wall Street. The United States is facing a depletion point where military hardware, economic stability, and public patience are all exhausting simultaneously. This is not a traditional war of maneuvers. It is a war of inventories, and the math is currently stacked in Tehran's favor. The most tangible symbol of this depletion is the smoldering wreckage of a THAAD terminal high-altitude area defense battery. This is not merely a piece of equipment. It is a crown jewel of American defense technology, a system so complex and expensive that according to the source document, it will take 12 years to replace a single battery. When an adversary can destroy a decade's worth of production with a well-timed squirter or a coordinated swarm, the concept of a defensive umbrella shifts from a strategic asset to a massive stationary liability. This material loss is compounded by a staggering production deficit. In a moment of brutal honesty, the Secretary of State admitted a statistic that should haunt every logistics officer. The United States produces only 6 interceptor missiles per month. Against this, Iran is launching hundreds of Shahed drones and ballistic missiles in single salvos. We are firing millions of dollars into the sky to swat away drones that cost less than a used car, and we are running out of bullets faster than we can manufacture them. Cost asymmetry $2,000 per interceptor versus $20 per drone. Production gap 6 interceptors, month versus hundreds of incoming threats. Replacement lag 12 years for a THAAD battery. This is what Senator Chris Coons labeled as improvisation. It is a reactive posture that ignores the fundamental law of attrition. You cannot win a war where your defense costs 100 times more than your enemy's offense and takes 100 times longer to build. The depletion is not limited to the battlefield. It has reached the global gas pump. In just 48 hours, Europe's gas prices surged by 67%. The Iranian strategy of targeting the logistical infrastructure from oil storage tanks in Kuwait to refueling tankers in the Indian Ocean has sent a shockwave through the energy markets. For the 85% of Americans who already oppose the war, this economic sting is the final straw. The conflict is no longer a distant news crawl. It is a direct tax on their daily lives. Image comparing production cost versus intercept cost for drone warfare. Ultimately, the depletion point refers to the exhaustion of credibility. When the Pentagon spokesman claims a facility is fortified, but the images show a destroyed shipping container, the trust between the government and the governed dissolves. When the Secretary of Defense calls a lethal failure a squirter, the empathy gap becomes a canyon. We are burning through interceptors, we are burning through billions of dollars, and most dangerously, we are burning through the benefit of the doubt. The Iranian strategy is designed to make the cost of this confrontation politically unsustainable before America can even bring its full conventional might to bear. They aren't trying to outshoot the US. They are waiting for the US to run out of the will to keep buying more bullets for a gun that can't seem to hit the target. The most terrifying aspect of the current conflict is not the range of Iran's missiles or the volume of its drones. It is the fact that the war has no off switch. We are witnessing what intelligence analysts call a ghost campaign, a pre-programmed, decentralized offensive that continues to execute its missions regardless of what any living Iranian official says or signs. This is the final lethal legacy of Supreme Leader Khamenei, who before his death reportedly pre-authorized a comprehensive target list and a decentralized command structure designed to survive the decapitation of Iran's central leadership. In a traditional war, a ceasefire is negotiated between two centers of power. But in this ghost campaign, the IRGC operates on a logic of autonomous execution. These units do not wait for a daily briefing or a green light from Tehran. They are executing a stay-behind strategy of attrition. As the source document describes, this decentralized structure is running without a central authority that can effectively negotiate a stand-down. Even if a living Iranian diplomat were to sit at a table in Geneva today, they might have no actual power to stop the next swarm of Shahed drones from launching toward an American base. The psychological toll of this ghost strategy is amplified by President Trump's recurring refrain, "You'll find out soon." He said it regarding the retaliation for the embassy strike. He said it about the next phase of the war. He said it about the duration. But as the American public has discovered over these 6 harrowing days, every time the president has promised clarity, what followed was a escalation more chaotic and costly than the one preceding it. The targets have now shifted from the tactical to the symbolic and political. Following an IRGC post claiming, "We are targeting American political centers. 2 drones successfully infiltrated the Riyadh diplomatic quarter." The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh remains smoking a grim monument to the failure of the extensive air defense umbrella. This is the Squirter Doctrine applied to the heart of American diplomacy. Iran is proving that no zone is green, no quarter is safe, and no political center is beyond their reach. As we reach the conclusion of this first week of hostilities, the situation is a convergence of 4 catastrophic trajectories. The war power's clock, the 6-0-day timer, is ticking toward a May 1st deadline with no clear path to congressional authorization. The depletion point. Our interceptor stocks are being exhausted by lawnmower drones while our high-tier defenses THAAD are being destroyed. The human cost. 6 Americans are dead, not in a fortress but in a shipping container, because of a dispersal strategy that failed to account for the overhead threat. The ghost mandate. We are fighting an enemy that has already authorized its own continuation, making diplomatic exits nearly impossible. This is the operational reality that 6 dead soldiers and 1 destroyed shipping container have made undeniable. Iran does not need to win a conventional battle. It only needs to wait for America's interceptor stocks, its congressional patience, and its public support to reach their collective depletion point. The Shuaiba strike was the moment the veil was lifted. It revealed that the most extensive air defense umbrella in the world cannot protect a port facility 10 miles from a main base. It revealed that fortified is a relative term, used more for press conferences than for protecting the lives of people like SFC Nicole Moore. The ghost campaign continues. The next American political center on the pre-authorized list has not yet been announced, but the squirters are already in the air. As the war powers clock runs down, the question for Washington is no longer how to win, but how to stop a war that was designed to have no end.